Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, Friday morning, November the 5th, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and I'm just having a coffee, waking up here, and I got the chat room open, and I'm going to pop the link in there to what we were looking at yesterday morning. This is from angerresources.com, www.angerresources.com, and this is called Defining Domestic Abuse. And we started talking about this particular article yesterday. It's from Dave Decker, and it's a great article. It kind of shows examples of what domestic violence is, defining domestic abuse, right? So, he was talking, about the fact that it needs to stop, and that we can stop it. And this website is awesome. So for anybody who has anger management problems, feels like your anger just gets the better part of your day, and anyone can experience this. And there's information on this website about road rage and things like this. And I mean, it's easy to become overwhelmed, and to allow ourselves to spend a lot of time in a state of anger, and I think a lot of people suffer from this kind of stuff. I've met lots of people. That's why I know this, and a lot of people might even not want to admit it to themselves or to anybody else that they have an anger management problem, an anger issue. But so many people do, and even though they may not want to admit it, it doesn't matter, because truth is truth, and that's just the way it goes. I know myself. I used to have a lot of anger issues. I've got, I thought I got them under control by stuffing my anger. So then that wasn't really helping the situation, because then when I did explode, it was a real problem, and it would just get blown out of proportion. And I think so that's not healthy either. So there's healthy ways to deal with anger, and we already kind of looked at some of that, which is really interesting. Like taking a time out, taking a step back and breathing, calming down, thinking before we speak, and just really there's lots and lots of ways to actually help diffuse an anger sort of blow up with somebody, and that we have to realize that our feelings and whatnot, because of the anger, do count. They do matter, and we're angry for a reason. Anger is normal, and it's a natural response, and it usually means that there's something wrong. So it's not good to ignore it. But then again, we don't have to become abusive, and that's where I had to learn myself years and years ago how to not abuse people when I became angry, because that's all I knew how to do. And so when you're taught that from a child, you grow up like that. That's the whole issue of the cycle of abuse, right? The cycle of abusive behavior, and that's what I spent my life. I've spent my life actually working on, is trying to not do that, right? And so, this is good information for anybody who might experience anger and not know exactly how to handle it or go about it. But I'm looking at the sections here about the domestic abuse, because Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz both go into the whole issues of domestic violence, domestic abuse, right? And they really they're working with people, and they're therapists, and they work with people in this field. So it's really good information. I hope everybody will go check it out. www.angerresources, ANGERESOURCES.com. And that's what we're looking at this morning. So I'm not a counselor or a therapist. I hold no certificates in those areas. I'm not a professional counselor. I'm just a person who pays to do my own blog talk shows, and I'm a survivor of child abuse, and I just wanted to be one more voice, to say to people that, we can do it. It is literally up to you and me if we want to move forward and heal. We have to allow ourselves that, and we have to allow ourselves to get help, right? So many times people who grow up abused and who spend their life not getting any help, you develop, you can, I think I know I did, develop this attitude that, it's okay, I'll make it, I'll muddle through, I survived all that, so, I suppose I can do it. In the meantime, I wasn't reaching out, and I wasn't really able to heal, because I wasn't allowing myself to heal. So we are ultimately responsible for what happens to ourselves as adults, right? I mean, we can't control what other people do, but we can control how we feel about things and how we're behaving. so important to not become an abuser like the people who abused us. And to me, that just was everything. I didn't want to become my parents, and I didn't want to continue the behaviors that they had taught me how to behave. Right. So that's the thing. It's been a great healing journey for me. I'm on the other side now, and which I know what it's like to be on the other side. That's why I'm doing this show, because I know what it's like to be sitting on the other side in a pit of darkness and hell, and not wanting to be here, and just thinking that would I ever be out of this pain? Would I ever be able to feel good about life or to feel good about myself? And I was able to hold down jobs and make it look extremely good, but at the end of the day, when it's just me, myself, and I sitting on the couch, I quite often wanted to self-injure and sat around in a gloom and doom and despair, when I was able to put on a happy face for the world, and on the inside I was dying, and it was killing me, and I was almost really wanting to kill myself, and that was just about 3.5 years ago. And I had always been a little suicidal because my family was always talking about suicide and threatening suicide and threatening to murder people, and my family was very murderous, and one of my brothers killed himself, committed suicide at the age of 33, and one of my other brothers died of a drug overdose at the age of 43, but he had been doing drugs since he was like 12 years old, and he knew those drugs would kill him at some point. It was just a slow death, right? And, I was heading down that road myself, and I knew, I used to not plan my suicides, but I had suicidal thoughts, and I would think, how could I would go through the whole issues of the best ways to end my life. And, this is absolutely horrible that someone would choose to do that. I would have never been able to find any goodness or any peace in my heart or feel good about myself or learn to love myself had I done that, which is what my brothers did. They lost out because they never knew a moment of peace. And, it's doable. It can be done. And what I do is I look up to these other people out here these other survivors who use their voice and their time to say to other survivors, hey, you can do it, and I don't throw it back in their face and say, well, look at you, it must be easy for you, because I know that it wasn't. These are people who suffered through the most horrific abuses ever, and I don't even know how I could, I know their stories and I read their stories online, and I don't think I could have survived that. And then I have other people telling me the same thing. I don't think I could have survived what you went through. And, that's the whole issue. We all, abuse hurts, and it doesn't matter what kind it is. It's all extremely damaging and deadly. And it does hurt. And the whole issue is that there's people out there, and I'm not going to throw it back in their face and say, well, look at you, it must have been easy for you, because I know that it's not. I know that all of us are having really the same exact hard time that the other guy's having to try to deal with this stuff, because we know what the issues are. We know what's at stake, and we know what's at hand. And so I know what it's like to be sitting on the other side, And I think that that's why I really appreciate these people out here whose voice, these survivors out here who have come before us and are out here now saying, you can do it, because that makes me feel good, because it gives me some hope, and it gives me the realization that, hey, look at these guys, they're doing it, they're surviving, and they're moving forward on their journey, and they're trying to help us all, and I think that's great. So that's why I want to do these shows. So I'm not a professional counselor or therapist, and you have to listen at your own discretion. I talk about every abuse-related issue you can think of. My shows are very sensitive, and so if you're sensitive to the topics of abuse or anything related to abuse, you want to turn the show off and listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone who's older, an adult, a parent, a caregiver, somebody in your family who's older, or a teacher, counselor, listen to the show with you if you're going to listen, because I think it's really important for kids to be protected. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we are all about protecting children, standing up for child rights, for children's protection, right? You deserve to be protected at all times, and you should be. And so anytime there's a chat room situation or online or whatnot, and you're listening to shows like this, you want to be very careful, because first of all, there's a lot of child sexual predators and whatnot out there trying to get a hold of children online, and you can just check out the FBI's website. They have a great website on internet safety for families, internet safety for children, and or just type into your browser internet safety or online safety for children, and it'll bring up great information on how to keep yourself safe online. So you want to do that. And also because my shows have a lot of adult content on them, and I think kids under the age of 18, young people should have permission to listen to my show, right? So we'll get right into this. I wanted to just kind of, we already read the whole portion of this where they were talking about defining domestic abuse, and that it's a consistent, ongoing, systematic pattern of abuse in a relationship, right? And it can happen between any two people. It doesn't matter what type of relationship it is, whether it's between a man or a woman. Women can be abusers too, not just men. And so he's going on to say that anyone can be an abuser, and we know this. But he is focusing on the male entitlement issue on these articles, right? But really, women can be very abusive as well, and I know because my mom was my main abuser, and she was also very abusive to my dad, but my dad was also very abusive, so that's the whole issue. My family was just kind of very dysfunctional, but some men do abuse and some women do abuse. We know this, and so anyone can be an abuser, whether it's an adult or a child, and abuse is a choice. It's just what people choose to do, so horribly enough. But he is kind of focusing on the male entitlement, and because he tries to help men to stop their abusive behavior, and to get to learn how to control themselves, right? To learn how to treat people better. So he's talking here, and he says there's eight types of abuse, right? So he went through. He's going to give us like an outline and a rundown on these actual types of abuse and what happens, sort of examples of each one, right? Whether it's emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and whatnot. And so you can read there, and that's from angerresources.com, www.angerresources.com. And he says, number one, male entitlement, having an attitude that conveys male dominance, a general disrespect for women, and the idea that men are more competent and capable than women. This attitude leads to the belief that, he says, quote unquote, I as a man have the right and even the responsibility to control how my partner thinks, feels, and acts, and to make her into the person I think she should be. This desire to control underlies all abusive behavior. And I mean, I've seen this a lot. I think most of us have seen somebody in this world who, especially a man, who thinks like that, and thinks that, they have to shape and mold their partner, and their partner should be just what they want them to be. Instead of loving their partner for who they really are, try to make them into something, that they think they should be. And women can do that too. So it's not just men who do that. Women can very much try to control their partner and make them be what they think they should be. See, anybody can do this, right? This is not just men who are doing things like this. Women do these things too. And it's very sad, but there has been for a long, long time this whole, general disrespect for women. And I think that's the huge problem, is so many men, because of the way that they grew up and these attitudes that they develop as they grow up towards women is very unhealthy. And they just don't feel like their partners, that their team, they're supposed to be their number one partner, their number one teammate in the relationship, and they should love them and cherish them for who they are. They tend to want to control the whole thing and think that they have the right to do that and to treat them very disrespectfully and stuff, and that's absolutely ridiculous and horrible. It says making generalizations, telling disrespectful jokes, and believing stereotypes about women. It says, for example, thinking to yourself or actually saying things like women are irrational, or it's your job to take care of me and the kids, or telling dumb jokes, dumb blonde jokes if she's a blonde or whatever. Having the expectation that you will make all the important decisions in the relationship, as the man, right, the male entitlement thing. Deciding where to live, whether she will work outside the home, what you will do for social activities. Just sort of controlling everything, where you're living, whether she can work or not. This is very old style thinking, you know what I mean? But there were lots and lots of men. I think that's changing now. But lots and lots of men used to think like that. And it was just the way it was. And even women would agree that that was the way it was, because women were brought up like that as well. So their parents, their mothers would tell them, this is the way that women behave, and this is the way that men behave. And that's why that whole cycle of kind of perversion, I guess I would call it a perversion, it happened. You know what I mean? Because people just thought, they just decided to think that that was the way it should be. And I know for my parents that was the way that it was. My dad ruled the roost, and he was the one that made the decisions where they lived, what they did, my mom, whether she was able to work or not, especially when she was younger. But she had so many children. I have so many siblings, right? She couldn't work outside the home. But the thing is he wouldn't let her have access to birth control. Really was harsh on her. He wouldn't allow her to get help. As far as medical attention and whatnot. He was one of these old-fashioned abusive kind of men that you would see on TV programs, and you would think, wow, what a jerk or whatever. That's the type of person he was. But they grew up in the 1920s, 30s, right? So they were very ignorant. They grew up in a very backwards place with a lot of backwards ideas, and their parents were born in the late 1800s, and so there was no new ideas coming in there. You know what I mean? So my parents were very much from the old days, and their beliefs and thought systems and thought patterns were that it was okay to abuse your wife, and it was completely okay to abuse your children, no problem. And back in those days, you could kill your child and get away with it. My grandmother did. My grandmother killed her son and got away with it. And so, see, people, they had a different feeling towards children. Children were not loved. They were not wanted. They were just farm hands. You know what I mean? That's how my parents grew up. They were just servants, really, and they were just farm hands. And so they were not loved or wanted or anything else. They were just brought into the world and made to work like slaves, right? So that's how my parents, they when they had us, they didn't know how to treat us properly, right? So they just passed on their garbage, same old ridiculous attitudes, towards bringing up children, and that's because of the ignorance level that they were brought up in, right, from the late 1800s. So that's the issue. There was not enough new information in there with my family. I seriously believe that was a huge issue, because my dad thought it was perfectly okay to rape his wife and to beat her up and to beat my mom up and to threaten her life, call her names, run her down. He would call her a whore and a slut, and he would come home from church, with his white suit and come in the door and he'd be, you are all sinners, you're all going to hell, and call my mom names and punch the kids around and beat up on my mom, and it was absolutely ridiculous. But he thought he was doing the right thing, because that's how he grew up, and so he thought, oh, this is just the way we do it, And so, when you grow up like that, if you don't change this behavior, you're just going to keep the cycle going, and that's the whole issue. It's really, really bad. He goes on to talk about treating her like a servant, demanding that she do things for you and expecting you to wait for her to wait on you, saying things like, go get me a drink or hurry up and get dinner on the table. And I see lots of people still doing this. And I know, like, my sweetheart would never treat me like that, and not because he'd be afraid that I would, retaliate. It's just because he loves me, and he wouldn't do that. The thing is because he treats me as an equal, right? This is the whole issue. We have an equal partnership, my sweetheart and I, and that's what a real relationship should be, an equal partnership. And it's like, I think if you wanted to ask your partner, like, would you mind getting me a drink from the fridge? It's no problem to ask somebody to do something for you, especially when you love that person and you're just lazy and you don't want to go to the fridge yourself, and you might want to ask your partner, well, hey, would you mind picking that up for me? I'm thirsty. Well, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But barking orders and just expecting that it's going to be done, that is absolutely ridiculous. And that's where, that would never work for me, because I wouldn't put up with that, right? So it's incredibly wrong. And women do that to men too. And my oldest sister was a prime example of that. She was very much the controller in the home and ruled the roost, and her husband was expected to do everything for her. And she was rude, like, she was extremely rude. But she grew up in our home, and she was not. She for protective measures took this role on of, I'll be the abuser of this, because she was abused as a child. So she thought, okay, I'm not going to allow myself to be abused as an adult, so I'll be the one to take over and rule the roost, right? And so that's what she did, and so she was the abuser then, because she was very much abusive, right? Controlling how household money is spent and handled, for example, pressuring her to account for all the money that she spends, withholding money from her, giving her an allowance, acting as if her work around the house and with the children has no economic value to the family and is not important as your outside job, right? Keeping the checkbook or charge cards in your possession. That's very much old-fashioned attitudes, and I don't, a lot of younger people don't do stuff like that. But unless if they grew up like that, they might. But it just seems to me that was kind of an old way of thinking. But there still are people that do think like that, and it's very ignorant. It's just a lack of education and a real, just not being brought up properly, right? Believing that you have to be the breadwinner and the moneymaker in the family, pressuring her not to go to school or work, or sabotaging or discouraging her efforts to do these activities to your own insecurity, right? Just because you feel insecure about your own education level, and you don't want your partner to one-up you on your education, so you don't want them to go to school and things like this, right? Which is absolutely stupid. It's just like, why not let your partner get ahead and do some wonderful things? That's what they should be doing. You should be encouraging that. And that's like parents not encouraging their children, because my parents, they made it to ninth grade or 10th grade or something back in like 1935 or 1940, whatever. No, it was like 1935, I think, And they weren't expected to finish school, back in those days, and if they did, it was great, and if they didn't, well, no big deal. So they didn't finish school, and I know they didn't really try to promote education in our home, and they actually they made us go to school. Like, we had to go to school, but the thing is they didn't care how well we did, and they certainly didn't care, if we were going to go on to college or university. That was just, they didn't encourage us to do anything with our lives, and that's because they weren't encouraged to do anything with their lives, right? So they just didn't know, and that's the truth. They really didn't. They were so ignorant. So that's just the thing. It's just not right. People should be encouraging their family members and their partners to do things. It's like, hey, this is the world of information, man. You can get the information, and why not go to school? Why not take a class? Why not try to better yourself and your family situation, right? Making the decisions about who does what in terms of household chores and parenting, like, for instance, refusing to make meals, do the dishes or the laundry, or to do what you define as women's work. And that's just another, sad issue that a lot of men, there's still some men out there that are like that. And, it's just kind of a ridiculous attitude, to think that that's just women's work, and that women can't do things like that men can do, like fix the car, which is totally ridiculous, because a lot of women actually do know how to work on vehicles, and they do know how to take care of stuff around that. It's just, people should be drawing off of each other's strengths, and just saying, hey, let's just make this work the best we can. Communicating to her or others that she is your property, or that you own her and that she belongs to you, because the two of you are in a relationship, living together or married, right? That's really bad. Because people are not property. You know what I mean? And we don't own anyone. And it's like, I mean, my heart belongs to my sweetheart, that's for sure, and his heart belongs to me, but he's not, I don't own him, and, he has the right to do his thing, you know what I mean, as long as he's not hurting me or abusing people. Being possessive and acting jealous, making the assumption that she's always on the make and looking to get involved with someone else, brooding about or continually bringing up real or imagined relationships with other men. Now, this is what happened between my parents. My dad, before my parents were married, my dad actually assumed that my mom was having an affair. They weren't even married, and they weren't even engaged, and my dad was accusing my mom of being this loose woman, right? Very much a whore. And so when they got married, he decided that he was going to punish her for that from day one. And so that's exactly what he did. And he made her life a miserable hell, right? And she, they were married for many, many years. Like, they were married for, almost 50 years or whatever. And, they spent 50 years in hell, right? Because my dad thought that my mom was sleeping around on him. They weren't even married, and I think that she might have been on a date, and he just assumed that he already owned her because he was going to marry her. My mom said that they were not even in a relationship at that point. You know what I mean? So my dad, he's borderline schizophrenic and he's very sick. My mom should have really taken a better look at who she was marrying. You know what I mean? Because the man is very sick, and he made her pay for that her whole entire life. And even after her death, my dad would say stuff like, your mom was such a whore, sleeping with everybody. My mom never slept with anybody, unfortunately, but my dad, right? Which is very sad, because she was stuck with this extremely bad man. And my dad, throughout our lifetime, would say stuff that, like, I was from the postman, I was the postman's kid, and we were all the neighbor's kids, right? He would say that my mom was sleeping with everybody and that none of us belonged to him, and all of this stuff. He's absolutely crazy, right? So he would make my mom suffer and pay for this. You know what I mean? Because he was he was just jealous and he was possessive and he was afraid that she was sleeping around, right? And she wasn't. And I know this for a fact. My mom was not that type, and just not. She was abused as a child. She was not into, she just wanted to have a good life, and I can't believe that the situation that she stayed in and made us stay in and actually put on us because of this, right? Absolutely horrible what people do to each other. There's too much of that jealousy and stuff. And I told, and being possessive, my sweetheart and I have had an agreement from the very beginning that, hey, if we found somebody else that we wanted to be with, we would not screw around on each other, that we would be honest and we would say, okay, I found somebody else and there's the door, right? Because it's so incredibly wrong to do that. And on the other end, it's so wrong to not trust your partner. So I told him, I said, look, if we can't trust each other, we shouldn't be together. I should be able to trust you, and you should be able to trust me. So if we can't trust each other, then let's end this relationship right now. Because I don't want to live like my parents. I don't want to live that nightmare, again, as in my own life, right? I said, let's not do that. Let's just trust each other and have a nice life, And so that's what we did, and that's what we do. And I totally trust him, and he totally trusts me because he knows, and I know that that we are one in heart. We are one, right? And that's awesome. We're like a total team. And that's the thing. That's the way relationships should be. That's the way that partnership should be. That marriage, that bond. If my parents never said a kind word to each other the whole time that I was alive. And I don't know about before because I wasn't I wasn't alive and I couldn't hear what they had to say to each other. But I know growing up, I never ever heard them say one nice, loving thing to each other, and that was hard. That was very sad. They would never hug each other. They would never hold each other. As a matter of fact, I found that, very bizarre. You know what I mean? Like when I was young, when I would see people hugging, I would think, wow, that's so different than what's going on at my home. Because my dad was always hurting my mom, right? And then my mom was always hurting my dad, right, because trying to retaliate. So my dad would hurt my mom, and then my mom would bash him in the head with a skillet or whatever, right? And, this is absolutely horrible, what people do to each other, right? And they would never say they loved each other. They would just always say they hated each other. I hate you, you bastard. You're going to hell. And if you're going to heaven, then I'm going to hell because I don't want to go where you're going. And they would have this was like a regular Sunday, Friday night, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday episode at my house, they were extremely abusive to each other. Did not share a room because my mom just couldn't handle him. She was just so sick and tired of him. So she slept on the couch in the living room, and we'd all try to protect her, right? Whoever was up and whoever was the oldest in the home would generally try to protect her from my dad. But she had every opportunity to leave, and I talk about that a lot on my shows. She was not forced to stay there, and the courts even, told her that, they had to go get counseling, and she stayed in that ridiculous marriage, with a man who was mentally ill. And I wouldn't have, I told her, I said, you should have got out. When I was younger and especially a teenager, I used to tell her what my brothers would tell her, and my other sisters, that she should get out, get her own life. And we were willing to get her an apartment. We were willing to actually get her out, and we were willing to to suffer the consequences without a mother, or just move out with her, or whatever. She was my main abuser. So hey, but the whole issue is that I cared about her, and I didn't want to. I was so tired of seeing the abuse that she was putting up with, and them fighting. You know what I mean? And I was tired of getting in the middle of it and being treated like crap. And so, this is the thing, right? So many people will stay and suffer in these relationships. And, it's horrible, absolutely horrible. I wish my mom would have got help. I wish she would have got out. She would have been able to, for the first time, know what it's like to be free from abuse, because she had never been free from abuse. She left her abusive mom, I'm talking vicious, violent, murderous grandma. My grandma was a murderer who abused all of her children. She left that to go into this marriage that was completely abusive. And so she never knew a day of peace in her life. She never knew a day without abuse, really, honestly. Like, this woman never knew what it would be like to be on her own and be able to make her own decisions and be free from abuse, right? That is so incredibly sad. If you're in that situation, make sure you get help. But I don't care. Whatever you have to do, but make sure that you phone somebody and you get some help. Call a crisis line, call somebody, a friend, anybody that, if you have a friend you can trust, right, which sometimes we don't. That's why I'm saying call a crisis line if you have to. Call somebody and, get some help, right? This is absolutely ridiculous. People have to suffer in this. And we really have to be responsible for our own actions and not be abusers. And that's the whole issue. I just thought, I don't want to be like my parents, I don't want to be abusive to people and hurt people. But then again, I need to learn how to handle and behave with because I need to learn this stuff because I never learned it as a child, right? So we are all ultimately responsible for our own behavior, right? And so we can't go around blaming people. Well, I was abused as a child, so that's why I'm the way I am. I can't go around and hurt people and abuse people and then try to use some sort of stupid excuse like, well, I was abused as a child, that's why I do this, or, there's no excuse for abuse. I'm sorry. It is our responsibility to keep our behaviors in check. And had my parents done that, none of that abuse would have happened. And we would have had a normal, happy life, and oh my God, I can't even imagine, as I don't know what it's like, right? I don't know what it's like to have a normal, happy life, right? As a child, right, growing up like that, no, I don't. And so the whole issue is that was horrific, and that never should have happened. And so we have to be responsible for ourselves. We really do. And you have to make sure that it is your responsibility to get some help if you are suffering with this, right? So, excuse me, I'll be back on the weekend, and you can check my show page. I might be changing sometimes just because I kind of have to this weekend, but I will be on. And next Monday, same time, same place, one child abuse survivor to another. Have a great day, everybody. Keep reaching out, You are worth it. You do matter. I don't care what anybody's ever told you before because they were incredibly wrong. You do matter. You do count. And you do deserve to have a good life. So we have to make it happen, right? So have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.